Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the next in this series of live interviews. This is designed really as an educational set of interviews so that we can learn more about techniques, lighting techniques particularly, playing with fiber optics. But I'm Michael Groves. I'm the host of this series. I'm the founder of Dwarvin Enterprises, the home of lighting without wiring. Well, you may have seen some of the pictures that we put out of Steve's work, and it's really very, very interesting to see the cyclorama that Steve's developed of Disney World. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you that I am so excited about this educational series because I learn a lot. In fact, I put a lot of the features that I hear people talking about, I put them on my own layout. So I want to give you just a little bit of a flavor of this. Earlier in the year, we had Paul McCarty. Paul came and talked really about how he lit a cave using a fiber, covering it with cellophane. And there's a man there reading hieroglyphics on the back of the cave. There's a lighthouse, very nicely put together with a fiber as well. One of my favorite pictures of all time, which looks like to me a Thomas Kilcade scene. And what he did was, in fact, use some moon lighting on his layout together with a whole load of lights from our company. Then Michael Smith presented, and he was presenting a range of lights that he'd created, lighting effects. And this is just one of an old gas pump system where he just stick the fiber up through the gas pumps and lit them, and then used some of our rafter lights. In fact, he was the one who asked for them, and we created them for him so he could light his roundhouse. And then Steve Geranix, well, he presented a really interesting building and also had on it an interesting sign backlit with the fibers, making it look really like a fluorescent backlit system. And I decided to go straight into my train room and voila, created my own effect of obviously our own lighting, Dwarvin Enterprises. We're going to introduce Steve in a moment, Steve Jacobs. He was a theater and stagecraft teacher for 33 years in a suburban Chicago school where he was technical director and stage designer. Well, if you did that, you would learn a lot about how to put things together, and particularly the area of lighting. So he's been working on a diorama, or a cyclorama, I should call it, for the last 12 years. Let's introduce Steve and welcome Steve to the Fiber Guild interview. Steve, you're live.
Hello, Michael, and everyone out there, everyone listening. Thank you for inviting me to show off a little bit of my work. Thank you.
Great. Good to have you with us, Steve. My first question really is, so many modelers model prototypical scenes. So that, it may be the Durango to Silverton line. It may be Western Pennsylvania, maybe the Maryland line, all sorts of lines. What on earth made you decide to choose the Disney World theme?
Well, I think that requires a little bit of background. So, yeah, you're right. I was a high school teacher, set designer, lighting, and so on for 100 shows during the 33 years that I taught. And during that time, my family and I visited Disney World in Florida many times, Disneyland in California quite a few times. We're basically a Disney family. And so there was one day I was setting up the monorail track in my old basement, just the track, that was it. And I thought, well, that can't be all. There's got to be more. So one thing led to another. And then I got the Main Street train station, and then, it sort of went from there. So it's actually been close to 14 years now since I started working on my layout.
So, Steve, how often do you visit Disney World? I mean, one of the things that people really worry about is, I'm a trumpet player, and if I have to play a solo that's extremely well known, I've got to get it absolutely right. Otherwise, everybody knows I made a mess of it. So Disney World is extremely well known. So how did you feel about approaching that?
Well, honestly, we're fortunate to go many times. We belong to something called the Disney Vacation Club, which is a timeshare. So we've gone many times, probably 3 to 4 times a year. And I was fortunate enough actually to work at Disney World in 1984 at Epcot shortly after it opened, and another year at the Disney. At the time, it was called the Disney MGM Studios, now Hollywood Studios. Both times as a stage technician. And over all these many years of traveling there, I've taken probably thousands of photos, which I've used for my research. So we go a lot.
Excellent, Steve. So that's given you all the ammunition you needed to, but obviously you have to have a great skill as well. So let me do this. We're going to move straight into looking at what you've got to present to us today, and I'm going to let you take over from this. Here we go, Steve.
All right. Well, if you look at the logo, it sort of was my idea to do a composite of both Disneyland and Disney World in Florida. Thus, the reason for the Anaheim meeting in Anaheim and Orlando meeting in Winfield, which is where we live outside Chicago. The trains that go around the parks, Disneyland, Disney World, are called the Grand Circle Tour. So I just took the logos from Walt Disney World and from Disneyland railroads and called it the Jacobs Line. So that's how I created my logo for that. Everything in my layout is HO scale. Most of the buildings that, there are a few buildings that Disney offered for sale. I purchased those. Everything else pretty much is handmade one way or another. So it's comprised of monorail and 2 trains that go around. It's about 13 feet square. But the one important thing when you look at this is that based on my theater background, I wanted this to be what I would call more theatrical environment. And as Michael alluded to, there's a cyclorama. So Michael, if we go to the next slide, this is without the light, and just so you can get an idea what it looks like. This is a theater cyclorama with the track above. I was fortunate enough to sort of secure the cyclorama and the track that was being thrown out from the school where I taught when they were doing a renovation. So I grabbed that and then I made it so that it goes three quarters of the way around the layout. And we'll talk some more about lighting, but if you look up in the top left-hand corner, there's a line there. That's actually an LED strip. And that's what helps with most of the lighting from above. There's also 4 little lights to the right on the screen. And those were just a small Costco purchase of small LEDs that I use on the mountain at this point. You can see the effect with the cyc pulled all the way around and the lighting from the LED above. The train station is lit with just a small MR16 lamp that's used for just basically a key light. I should have mentioned the last slide. There's also LED strips that I have attached to the side of the layout so that they actually project to the cyclorama on the side. So that helps me to do a little bit more lighting, shading, etc., from bottom to the top. So this slide is pretty much just regular downlight that's above in the room. I didn't mention that I also painted the ceiling black so that I could basically create a total environment and light it effectively. Well, the modeling, one of the questions that always comes up on everybody's layouts are what kinds of materials are you using for creating things? I carved a lot of styrofoam, the mountains, the Matterhorn, Big Thunder Mountain on the left side, and some others that don't show up real well in some of these slides are all done with styrofoam and some other materials as well. So another shot, just seeing how the lighting changes with some of the downlight from above and then side lighting from the LED strips on the side. And the LED strips are just cheap ones that I bought on Amazon. They come with a little remote control, but I have a total of 4 in the ceiling around, and then I think it's 3 strips going around the table itself. The 2 trains that I have, there's actually 3, but the 2 trains that you're seeing are Disney trains. Everything in the layout, is Disney related. So whether it's a car, the trains, the buildings, everything has to be related one way or another to Disney. All of the signage comes from the tons and tons of photos that I took over many years. And I photo reduced all of them so that they would work on the layout. So if you were able to see close-ups of the buildings like the Emporium, some of the other stores and shops and things along Main Street, all of the names are accurate to the park. If you look too at the left train, that is the Lily Bell. It's modeled after the train that Walt Disney had in his backyard. He had a whole steam layout. If you know anything about any of Disney's history, he had a live steam train in his backyard. He lived on Carrollwood, thus the name Carrollwood Pacific, and he named the engine and the tender after his wife Lily, so it became the Lily Bell. If you get really interested in this, I would encourage you to look up Michael Broggie, who is a Disney train historian. I've been able to see him, hear him talk several times, met him. He has a terrific book on all the Disney railroads, and his father was the first Disney Imagineer who created the train that Walt had in his backyard. So he worked at the studio. So just a little bit of background with that. All of these things, as I've read and gone to the parks, are the things that have given me the inspiration to do what I'm doing here. As you look at this, besides the fact that there's the monorail in the photo as well, if you look at the two covered areas to the left and the right of the train station, they don't look like much in just regular light, but later on in another slide, you'll see the effect of using the fiber as well as on the station itself. So these are a series of some of the attractions. Everything was made, like I said, in a theatrical way. So even the construction of the table was done in such a way that I could take it apart, which was helpful because for about 10 years, 9-10 years, it actually lived in our other house. Then I had to dismantle it all and move it to our current house where we moved in 4 years ago. And I've probably done a good half of the layout in this house. But I've done them as a series almost of small dioramas that I could work on a workbench and then integrate them into the layout itself. So what you're looking at here is the Jungle Cruise attraction with all of the boats and the characters, animals, etc., etc. Slide. You see it integrated into the layout with a top view. And the mountain off to the right is actually a tunnel that goes around to a siding. And by doing that, it allowed me to also enclose the attraction. So it was another way of kind of containing the area, so to speak. These are obviously the boats on the attraction. When we were all sheltered in place here for a long time during the pandemic, I was talking to one of my friends and I said, so I'm doing the Jungle Cruise ride, but the problem I'm having is finding any boats, especially the number that I want, like 12 of them. He said, well, he's got a 3D printer. So between he and I, we got the research and he actually printed all of the boats for me. And they were just a kind of a tan plastic. And then I assembled them and then did all the embellishments on them, added the words, etc. The water effects that I've used are the woodland realistic water, and that helps with obviously giving it a more accurate look. At Disney, there is an island called Tom Sawyer Island, and it's at both parks, as is the Jungle Cruise ride. But even though they have similar attractions, there are some differences between them. So what I've done with everything on the layout is, like I was saying, kind of a composite. And I'll give you another example in a moment. So this is Tom Sawyer's Island. It's got the fort at one end at the left, and then where people arrive on the right-hand side. So built separately. I do everything on masonite, and modeling materials, pretty much just the standard things that you get at hobby shops. So seeing it integrated into the layout, water, etc. Again, everything is handcrafted. Off to the right, it's really hard to see, but there's a pontoon bridge Again, if you happen to have ever gone to Disney World and Tom Sawyer Island, there's this bridge that goes over. They're basically pontoons in the water. So I try for as much realism as I can in the detail, like like we all do on our layouts, and just trying to get that to work in the water and so on was probably one of the bigger challenges on this particular piece of scenery. Another view, again, everything is built from scratch, including the Harper's Mill building, the rafts. My wife and I collected all the twigs from our trees in the neighborhood sometime last year, and those became the used for the fort, for the raft, and so on. One of the attractions at both parks is Big Thunder Mountain. It is the runaway roller coaster. I don't have the technology, shall we say, to actually have a running roller coaster train, but I wanted to have the impression. So I took old HO scale track, bent it, manipulated it, etc., so that it looked like it could be the ride. And that's what you see sort of in the background there. The entry queue line is a tipple from a coal mine that I didn't use on the layout, and took the wording Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, etc., queue line off to the right, and so on. The next scene is, excuse me, It's a Small World. I promise I won't sing the song and drive everybody crazy. There's one big difference between the two parks. The ride is pretty much the same, except that in California, the queue line and the boats go to the outside of the building where the ride is, whereas in Florida, you enter an actual inside building, and then all of the facades there that you see that represent the different countries are on the inside of the building. So again, kind of a composite of them, but taking all those actual elements. A lot of craft materials with this one. And seeing it integrated into the layout with the various walkways around to get to the different parts of the park. And in the background, you can see the Haunted Mansion with the green roof. And then off to the left of that is the castle. So different views of the small world. If you look at the sign, you'll see that lit up later. But the fiber that I use to light that is actually in the hedge. The challenge for me, and perhaps all of you who are using any of the fiber, is just getting the right angle, the right height, and where you run the fiber. In this case, you'll see that I didn't get it exactly the way I wanted it because the sign isn't lit perfectly, but you'll see that in another slide. Next, please. So moving to Town Square. Originally in our other house, I had the typical small carriage lights around Town Square in the same locations that I have these, but they were the type that needed electricity, and they all had the very fine wires, and I had I believe it was 18 of them running under the table, trying to wire them, wire nuts and so on and so forth. It was just a nightmare. When I moved to this house and I started to resurrect everything, I changed to the Dwarvin carriage lights, and the fiber so much easier. Instead of having two wires to deal with, there's one fiber coming off of each. And as you know, they don't have to be electrified, just running to the lamplighter box. So a lot easier in that respect. And again, this was all done on a piece of masonite and then put in place. In California, they have the Matterhorn bobsled ride. So you have the queue line underneath that brown building there, or kind of canopy area, with the signs from the park. And same thing, I used some track to replicate basically the ride, but all you see, since all of it goes through the mountain itself, is just the loading area. And then I took some HO scale cars and doctored them up to look kind of like the bobsleds, or at least my attempt at it. In the foreground is the Liberty Bell boat, the river boat. So it's the loading area for the river boat, the landing. And then above are cable cars, which they used to have in Disneyland and Disney World. They have since taken them out. Actually, many years ago, they took them out. I found these at our local train show. They are actually supposed to work, but in many, many attempts, I could never get the electrical to work and get it to run exactly. So they are on the layout, but they just sort of hang there. But that's okay.
Steve, I'd like
Yeah,
to ask you about lighting
sure.
the waterfall. What thoughts have you
Yes.
had for lighting that?
Currently, I have just a small, like not a flashlight bulb, but a small light bulb underneath and behind the waterfall. It is very ineffective. So at some point in time, I'm going to run a fiber underneath that and try and illuminate it that way, which will actually make it come alive a lot more than what you're seeing just without any light on it. So that's one of the goals.
Great. I've seen some people start to use fibers as part of the waterfall itself.
Oh, interesting.
And especially
Okay.
if you use more of an illumination approach, an animation approach, then you can do some sequencing even of light. So just, yeah, so that'll be fun. We ought to talk about that.
Yeah, good idea. Monorail station. Um, Again, it's a little different because in Florida, it's actually by the train station. So the one that part of it was spacing. I didn't have enough space to do much in the way of an actual station. So I took the idea of what they have at Epcot, which is basically a long ramp that goes up and back to get up to the ride. I had to have something because it didn't make sense to have the monorail and no way to get on it. So that's how I came up with what you have, what I have here. And then over on the left side, you can see where it says high voltage. Again, signs from the actual rides and or attractions that have been photo reduced and used on the layout. So now all the following slides are all the effects that I have been able to accomplish using fiber in most of the applications. So we'll go to those. So we have the LEDs above that have that kind of orangish amber, or kind of an orangish look. I call that my early morning look, which is the again, the LED strips. One of my goals in this particular scene is over on the far right-hand side, you have the Contemporary Hotel, and I hope to add fibers along the vertical members of that and nick them so it looks like the little lights that, because what I have is not really accurate. It's not just one strip across the top as you see on the right. So I need to try and change that. We have, in this early morning look, you can see the carriage lamps in Town Square are on, and then the train station is also lit just a little bit. And we see a different angle, and here we're seeing the roadway that leads towards the Contemporary Hotel, and we're looking at the highway lights. Again, these are using the fibers. Town Square, you can see in the distance. We'll get a better shot of that coming up here. But a comment about, Michael was talking about learning from each other. One of the things that I found to be difficult with the highway lights is when I would put them in the base that comes with the light, they would turn. I was having trouble getting them to stay in one position. So what I ultimately did was I would position where I wanted the base, and I would glue the base with a hole. Well, I would drill the hole, put the base in place, make sure that the hole went through where the fiber was going to go. And then I would put the fiber in, but with just a touch of glue to hold it in place so that it would not twist. And that seemed to work okay. But they're a little bit finicky, you might say, and want to keep twisting. So that was one of the challenges with the highway lights. But I love the lights. They're in several places on the layout. They work very effectively for highway lights.
Before you go there, I have to say that, yeah, that's been one of the challenges I had when I initially designed those up and put them in, Steve. Um,
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I did was then just use a drill size that was exactly the same size as the shaft, I think, which is a maybe a 3/16th, I can't remember exactly offhand. And that way I could fit them in snugly. But you're absolutely right. If you put them in a hole which has any looseness to it or any give, the fiber will determine which way the light is facing rather than you. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I did try that, and I think it was a 3/16th, but for whatever reason, maybe the hole was still just slightly bigger. I'm not really sure. But anyway, it seemed to solve the problem and got it to work just fine. So now we're looking at Town Square with the carriage lights on. I really personally like this effect a lot. There are 18 of them spread around in front of the buildings and in the main square right there as well. Still kind of an early morning look. Next.
Well, before you go there, I love the little. Is there a band playing there that I see?
Yes. That is my tribute to the many times, although I was in the theater department, we were very close with the music department, and I was very friendly with the band director. And they went to Disney World numerous times with what they call Magic Music Days. So they would perform. So that is our high school band with
Ah,
the correct colors of the uniforms. And although you cannot see it in this slide, there are two people carrying the school banner that says Glenbard North High School. So it's sort of my tribute to those trips and the fact that I was very friendly with our band director. I was just lucky. It just turned out that we have a local train show here, which is pretty big for the area in the county, and I found this bag of musicians, so I was able to make it work.
fantastic. Well, being a band member myself and having done marching sessions, I really appreciate what you did there, Steve.
Yeah. And both of our daughters were involved in marching band um, for all of their high school years, or band and or color guard. So we're quite familiar with the whole process of marching band. So we go to the nighttime look with blue LED only above and the same carriage lights that you just saw. So
Mhm.
it gives a whole different feel. The train station has a number of fibers. The flagpole at the top, actually, Michael, that was your suggestion early on when we started talking about this. You said something about, well, why don't you light the flag? So that's what I did. The lights around the top row there horizontally, those are all one fiber that is nicked slightly to give that look of smaller light bulbs. The challenge with that was the you can twist or you can turn the fiber, you can bend it rather, you can bend it, but to get it to stay in one place is a little bit of a challenge. So with some dots of glue and doing a section at a time until it was solid and holding. And I don't remember what I used to make sure it was holding in place as it was gluing, but I think it came out pretty good. Uh,
It looks amazing to me. Just a little trick there that because I did one on an English
mhm,
pub that I had where I had to put a V section up, and so what I had to do was draw it out on a piece of paper. But then I used my boiling water technique just to be able to
mhm.
make the fiber do exactly that shape on the paper. And then when I just sort of stuck it onto the side of the building, it was a good match. So
That's a good idea. I didn't think about. I know about the boiling water that you're referring to, but I didn't think about actually bending it into the shape that you want. I was thinking more about just straightening the fibers so they weren't curling, but I never thought about using it to bend to the exact shape that you want. Interesting. Yeah, bottom left and right corners, though it's a little hard to see in this slide. It's actually a shadow effect, and you can see the shadow on the ground, and that's one fiber on each side on the inside, so it is catching the physical structure of the window and creating the shadow that you see there. In theater, we have something called a gobo, and a gobo is essentially It can be glass, it can be a piece of metal that is etched to whatever the shape is, and then it is placed within the spotlight. And that's what creates a lot of the various shapes and shadows that you see in theater productions. So this was sort of the same idea, but using it in a totally different way with a fiber, just to create the shadow effect.
That's very imaginative. Thanks for that, Steve. That's great.
Yep. So back to what I was saying earlier about illuminating some of the signs, I'm still not totally happy with the way this came out. Just trying to get the right angle to light the sign completely. I mean, it's okay, but it could be better. uh, and the same thing is true in the next one with the water tower. I keep it's at the fiber is at an angle, so the hole that I drilled into the table is on an angle, and then just trying to get the light to shine just exactly where you want it is a little bit of a challenge, and partially because I don't want the fiber sticking up out of the table. I want it almost flush with the layout top, so that you're not seeing so much of the tip of the fiber. You're seeing more the effect of what it's lighting.
Great, great. I just saw a comment from somebody. I put it up on the screen here. Robert says Steve's detail is great. So there you go. I just thought you'd like to be able to see that. That's really great.
Well, in all honesty here, we have to be honest. Robert Murphy, Bob, is one of my closest friends, and he has his own great layout, which is all Lionel. And he's got a great layout himself. And I've introduced him as well to the lamplighter unit. So that's forthcoming on his own layout. But thanks, Bob, for the thoughts. Appreciate it. And he's helped me on my own layout, which is a little bit more of a close-up of the street lights, the highway lights, and then the billboards. So, Michael, you came up with the idea of the billboards, and then you sell them with all the various auto. The signs are mostly auto-related, but that didn't work for me. And I had a number of small signs. Basically, they were all Disney. So I took and used my own signage and just put it on your billboard, and works real well. I have four of those around on the layout.
That looks superb. So you just sort of took a picture of, made a print of it, and then stuck it onto a hard backing, or what did you do?
Actually, in this particular case, actually all of them, there were some small like decals almost that my wife found years ago that represented different things in the parks, and they just fit perfectly size wise. And so that's what that is. This is not a photo. This is actually a printed, kind of like a decal almost, that I had.
Great, great.
And that is all of the slides. This is Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell, of course, introduces the fireworks at the end of the evening in both of the parks. I don't know. Personally, I would not want to be flying on a wire from the castle down to a building in Tomorrowland, but hey, what can I say? So questions, comments, whatever.
Well, thanks so much for doing that. That was great, Steve. Yep, so that was great. Yeah, anybody got any questions, any comments to make while we're just sort of talking about this? I mean, I really like the lighting effects. What impresses me, Steve, is just obviously your ability to understand the ambient lighting as well, not just the individual building lamp lighting. And that's
Right.
something that I think many modelers probably need to learn quite a bit about. I know that's certainly true for me. I just have sort of floodlights over the top, which I can dim a bit, but that's about it.
If you haven't figured it out, the trains really to me are a small part of the whole layout. I'm much more into the scenic elements and the modeling, and that's really what I like to do. The trains run, they're there, but I don't really do much with them. Periodically they'll run. So now the whole tabletop basically is finished. So all the scenic effects are done. So now I'm concentrating on all the lighting that you've seen. And in terms of future projects, there are some other places on the layout that I want to do fiber where I can, but I'm also working with a theatrical lighting company that I used to work with. And they're actually small display lights. They're done for special effects. And the company came upon a number of them. And so I'm working with them. And if I get it to work right, I'll have more pools of light that can be controlled, and then fireworks and clouds projected on the cyclorama as well.
Fireworks. Oh, that reminds me of something I made one time. I think we talked about it. I'll be excited to see what you do for fireworks.
So will I.
So, any other projects other than, I mean, the cyclorama is just amazing, and obviously you continue to work on it. Any other things that you're sort of thinking of working on?
Well, if it works, when I finish all of these things, I will do an extension on the table going off to the side. And I've always been fascinated with movies. I used to teach film production as well. And the Disney MGM studios or the Hollywood studios used to have something that they call the backlot tour, which was basically the buildings that they would film locations in front of buildings and so on. So I hope to do a side kind of view, you might say, of just basically a backlot tour using all of my models from when I was growing up, from my first and second layout when I was a kid. The Plasticville model, buildings
Right.
readily available. And so put those into a kind of a backlot tours. We'll see. That's
Great.
way down the road.
Well,
So
we have another question here. It's from Kenneth. He says, when nicking the fiber, Robert, I think he's addressing it to Robert, but I think it's probably better to have you answer it, Steve. What's the optimal distance between those? I think he means between the necking.
yeah. Well, I think the easiest answer is simply it really depends on the effect that you're going for, because wherever you nick the fiber, you're going to get light coming through it. So if you're trying to do as I laid it all out so that I could put all of the nicks in. So they're all measured out, so they were the same distance in between each. But it depends on what effect. But it takes next to nothing to nick the fiber. So all you have to do is take an X-Acto knife and just barely touch it, and it will let the light through. So a little bit of experimenting really works well. I don't know if that answered it well. It really depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, that's great. Kenneth, my another answer for you would be, when I was doing my Christmas lights, I just nicked them on a regular, actually very close. In fact, I would say probably about 3 millimeters apart. And then I painted the fiber first, nicked it. Then I painted those nicks red and green. And I had 60 lights on my English pub before I knew it, in about 30 minutes. So I was really pleased with that. It was a bit of an experiment. It was almost Christmas time, and I thought, what am I going to do in my life right now? Why don't I do something new? So I guess Robert put up a comment here where he just says useful. It also depends on the scale. Steve's is HO. For O, obviously you need a little bit more spacing. I think that's a great comment, Robert. Thank you for that. Any other questions for Steve?
Correct. That's all I have.
Well, as they would say, that's all, folks. They've said, I can't really say it in the right way that Disney would have said it. But thank you so much for joining us today, Steve. The rest of you stay on for a moment. I'm just going to finish off. So, Steve, I'll let you go back to your cyclorama. And thank you so much. It's just amazing that God has blessed you so much with such talent to do this. I'm almost envious of it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity to let others see it. Thank you. All right. And best luck to everybody else on your own modeling.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So, thanks a lot. As I say, these are really designed to be educational. If you, in fact, feel that, or you know somebody who would like to really talk about their layout and you're really impressed, or maybe it's your layout, maybe that's true for you, Robert, then do contact me, Michael at Dwarvin.com. You can obviously see a lot of our lighting. What Steve actually did was he actually used almost every light that we have, which just amazed me. The only thing I didn't see on was our industrial building lamps and new railroad crossings and stuff like that. But anyway, the other thing is, it'd be great if you could subscribe to our Dwarvin YouTube channel. We actually have quite a lot of videos on those, and I just discovered that the more subscribers we have, the more tools that YouTube allows us to start to play with, which makes the videos a lot more interesting. Anyway, the only comment I would make too is don't spell it with an Dwarvin with an E, you'll get somewhere else. It's with an I. And then join us on the Facebook Fiber Guild. Obviously, you guys are on the guild, but I just hope you can invite others as well. And I hope this has been somewhat educational, and I look forward to doing further of these in the future. And do put comments on the Fiber Guild as to where you would like to see, what you'd like to see us be doing more of, particularly in terms of some of these educational presentations. So that's all from me as well. So wish you all the best with your lighting, with your layout, and just having a great load of fun. So that's all from me. Thank you. Bye for now.